Okay. Hi, everyone. So it's been a while. I haven't really been in the calls last week, and we had a gap the week before. So I'm really quite excited to be with you. I'm also feeling quite intense. There's there's so much that usually wants to be spoken, and everyone receiving it hold something quite big. So to try to hold all of those big elements together in an even bigger space isn't always easy. Um, but difficult is sometimes fun. And to hold like a global space requires a certain set of conditions, certain disciplines. So I've been doing this for a long time now, and I want to arrive at this moment with a sense of wholeness. Very often people wonder what is maybe a mapping that is appropriate to inner dance, considering this energy is global and interdimensional and intercultural and travels across time and space. I think one of the main questions I would ask you that is often for me something I ask myself is, if you had a lot of time and a lot of space, whether it be years, decades, um, or much longer, like I remember these years where vampire movies were really popular. And I think one of the reasons why people were interested in that concept is we were wondering what it would be like to become immortal. Um, I read a long time ago about these people who had this, like the Rosencrantz or Comte de Saint Germain, John the Beloved. I actually had this happening in me when I went in my spiritual process. I felt like I was tracing immortality, and that somehow we were this. That it doesn't matter if one day you die, there's something continuous in us that's always accessing, like all of these lives, all of these moments, all of these places that are seemingly separate all across the earth or the universe. So inner dance somehow grants immortality, not by taking away the personal or physical death, but somehow we get to deal with death in a different way. Like something is negotiated, something becomes more accessible. So if you were really old and you have been here a long time, what would be your questions? What would you have asked that would maybe transcend just like, who are you? Because that becomes just so stretched out, so that you might have played out these many roles. You might have been a rock and roll star, a medical practitioner, a school teacher. You might have been the president of a country, or you might have been some kind of scientist. And you've done it. You've done everything you've been interested in. You've taken up the arts, music, the sciences, the philosophies. So when you take all of these experiences and they start to integrate within you, you start to receive a kind of mapping. So in many ways, you start to access the philosophy of the planet. And when you do look at philosophy in general, there are questions that are asked. It doesn't matter if it's in India or in China or Europe. It doesn't have to be from antiquity, from ancient times. It could be up to contemporary philosophy. We we begin to ask the questions, the essential questions, the deep questions about what is all this, like what is time, what is space, what is causality, what is the nature of reality, what is the structure of of our psyche, and then of the psyche of the planet. So I feel that this is what inner dance had given me. In a way, my inner dance actually became a lot deeper when I left my solitude, when I left the island, when I came back to the world, and there was this energy that was happening, that was speaking, that was being received, that was transforming people's lives. I felt like time and space stretched out, and I would be there, and a lot of intense things are happening in the room, often loud, explosive, weird, wild. But somehow inside me, I felt like I'm watching the story, the old, ancient, big story of the planet, of mankind, of the universe playing itself out. And somehow all these stories fit together like puzzle pieces. They seem to make clicking noises whenever someone shares something, whenever um, whenever anything was happening in the movements, in the emotions, in the music. Um, so inner dance has something to say about the grand puzzle. And I would like or love to explore this with you, not just today, but in the long term. So what we do today is we look at the philosophy of inner dance, which is not really the philosophy of inner dance. It's the philosophy of consciousness itself. Um, in order to give you a larger backdrop, to hold some of your own questions, questions that are bound to come up every time one encounters this energy. So one example of a question that we could ask that is one of the most asked is, what is the nature of those movements? When the body begins to move, when it begins to dance, whether from inner or outer, doesn't have to be the physical movement. There are movements that are not only physical. Do they mean anything? Do they mean nothing? Do they mean everything? That's a really rich inquiry. And, you could surmise as to why that would be important. You might discover something within that that helps you to listen to that which we normally can't hear, to see what we can't visualize, to to sense from many senses what remains invisible when you're just looking at the body moving like that? You know, so to answer that question, is there a simple set of mechanisms that helps you to understand, let's say, a mudra or a kriya or something to do with the chakras and this and that? You know, like what is a system that holds these secrets that are emerging, that are so spontaneous and novel? They're always different depending on the moment. Some people do have similar experiences. So I want to play a section of a video. It's an old inner dance video. I thought maybe we could watch it together. Just to trigger something in you, in us, as to the nature of these questions, like what is moving, who is moving, what is the movement. So when you watch the lady in this video, she's a Filipina American. She's from San Francisco. Listen to the movements through her words. She's speaking something, she's describing the energy, yet at the same time, the movements themselves are doing the speaking for her. I haven't really made any inner dance videos after the year 2013. So these videos are artifacts of what the energy was holding something like 10 years ago. This particular video is probably 9 or 10 years old.
There was moments where I saw that is the animal. There was moments where I saw that the indigo, and then when you mentioned to go to the lower, I saw like the yellow and the red, but mostly I saw a lot of white. And the animal that came to me was a bird, which is the animal that I connect with the most. And it was a white bird. And it seemed like this bird transformed into a goddess right in front of me, and it just brought me to tears. Because I've never experienced it in that depth before. In meditations a few times, but this time it felt like it was Gaia, the mother, goddess, feminine, the divine feminine, right in front of me. And we were seeing each other eye to eye. And as we moved and danced, she became a reflection. That's how it felt. It just felt really amazing. Yeah, there were, I did ask, like, who am I, what am I, and what do you want me to do? The answer that came to me was, I am divine, and I am one with the goddess. So I am a goddess, and we all have that in us. Well, this trip has been amazing, connecting with the land and the people and feeling like I've fallen in love again with nature and Mother Earth. And so that this experience confirmed to me that my intention of doing my best to protect and serve Mother Earth and the beauty that we see and the abundance that we have is so important, and I feel like that is my purpose. Using who I am in any way, and I am many things. So, and I possess many gifts, and that is a way I can be of service. And being here has been the ultimate answer to my questions. And really had a moment of being one. That moment of oneness that just brought me to tears, and I've never felt that way before. And I feel like we're all being called, and we're all being called to do this great work, and it feels good that we have this dance to share with the world, to spread that news, and to experience it as well, because it's one thing when you just talk about it, but when you feel it and it's in your DNA, and you know, and it feels right, it just all starts to make sense. There was also a moment where I saw like a DNA strands, and maybe it was like our DNA changing, or my DNA changing, and us transforming. That's how it felt.
Okay. I love her. I love that. Um, Something so centering about um, watching something coming through so clear. Yeah, like someone sent a question today, and it was regarding how to hold space. The question was around what is the role of these many things that facilitators around the world are now doing, like with their hands, especially with their fingers, these things that are so dramatic and theatrical. Are they important? So the question wasn't so much about the movements participants are doing, but what facilitators are doing with their hands. Are they important? Do they play a part? Um, so receiving that question, which is coursed through Italy, it got me to remembering how I might have done that a lot before, mostly in demos. I don't really do it so much outside of demos. You get to a point where you realize um, the energy knows and doesn't need so much manipulating, or we're more interested in what are the conditions that allow not just the energy but consciousness itself to reveal its layers, its parts, its truths. So there's something we can't escape were we to start exploring these questions about the movements. And it has something to do with the body. There's something about the body speaking that's rising up and that is communicating something to us. And it's not just a personal body, it, it's a global body. that is sending something. Um, so if you know the conditions that allows this to arise, no, you don't need to do so much. What you do is you set the conditions. You create the conditions that allows this wider, deeper sensing of the world to happen on its own. And I feel that a lot of the insights are within philosophy and science coming together. We could go into spirituality if you wanted. There are a lot of possible insights there. And I've looked at many of the systems, the energy systems. Um, and a lot of those energy systems are pretty intuitive. So if you would love to just listen to your intuition, you don't need so much of philosophy and you don't need so much of science. What philosophy and science give us is structure. And that structure unravels through time and space. So, one of the things I would invite you to think about is what is the story of the mind? If it wasn't just your mind, go back to that thought experiment where you're really old. If you're really old and you've been here for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of years, how did our consciousness grow or evolve over that time period? What did we look like a long time ago? And how has that been shifting? So there's something about the story of philosophy and science that binds some of that understanding in a microcosm that allows us to perceive the shifting around these structures. So I'm gonna share from a Prezi space. Um, I think we really need to outline our points here um, in a way that's clear. So, okay. So we look at the puzzle. Let's look at the puzzle today. Philosophy is love and wisdom. Philo is love, and Sophie is wisdom. So that could be the love for wisdom. You know, it could be love and wisdom together. So we start with, I think trust is it. Trust is a way of knowing. There's something about this energy that activates trust. But then we go into our trust process, like who can I trust? What can I trust? Um, when I was reading spiritual literature right before I came into the unraveling of my inner dance, um, there was a cycle of life, the great chain of being that spoke that which we know, that which belongs to our understanding, is that which leads to what we create. You know, everything we do, everything we speak comes from everything we know. And that leads to everything that is, everything that we're experiencing. So that's cyclical in a way that everything that we experience then leads to further knowing, so that when your knowing shifts, then your creation shifts. And then further, your experience will change. You change any of these, you change what you know, you change what you're speaking, how you're behaving, how you're acting or reacting, or if you change the way you're experiencing life, which would still be a decision. I don't know how that could be for you. Let's say you're walking down the street and suddenly you start to float or levitate, and suddenly you're flying. That is not just an experience. That would change your whole perception of reality, of the physics, of the physical world, and that would change the way you think, the way you act, and so on and so forth. Um, so I think that's one way of approaching a large enough framework that envelops inner dance. Um, so much of my inner dance life has been through fatherhood. Spent a lot of time with my babies, my kids, and we really need to spend a lot of time with young humans, with babies, with toddlers. Um, it gives us a deep understanding of what the mind looks like in its purest form, also in its point of origin. And really, people going into inner dance are going into that space. And um, so we want to go back to how was it before time and before reality as we know it. So, one of the questions toddlers ask as they're initiated into the world is the question, why? I wondered at that. Why do they ask why? Why does the sun come up? Why does it rain? You know, why does this happen to me? Why do I have that dad or that mom? Why do I get hungry? So I watched my kids asking why, and I watched these inner dance baby minds in the sessions, the trainings, the workshops ask why. After they have left linear time, after they've left um, reality as we know it, there's one answer to why. If there's something universal enough, it would be because. So for me, looking at this from a philosophical place, causality is probably the basis for all thought and knowledge. This is certainly a common perspective across the many philosophies. What causes reality? What causes the world? What causes you? What causes tomorrow? What causes success? What causes a good day? What causes disease? What causes learning? What causes addiction? There's a whole cascade that would follow after you start with cause. How are stories created? What is the theory of evolution? Why does religion even exist? What is the nature of time and space and dimensionality? All of these are going to tumble like dominoes once you arrive at a theory of cause. And why this becomes really interesting in inner dance is this event. Um, it's called retrocausality. Let's look at the Wikipedia definition. Okay, retrocausality or backwards causation is a concept of cause and effect in which the effect precedes the cause in a time and so blah blah blah. Um, let's simplify that. It, it's about go back to this slide here, maybe. It's about that. It's about trust. There's something about the movement of inner dance that is about trust. It's about knowing ahead what has not yet happened. This is somehow what brings us together. This is what brings you here. There's something that you know that you do not know. There's something that you do not know that you know. And somehow you're learning to trust. And if there is something missing, something we are retrieving, something that was lost, this could be it. What does it mean to heal? What does it mean to transform, to awaken, to find meaning? What would it mean to trust again everything that is happening? To see that everything is connected, that nothing is separate, that there's no separation. How are we being led? And we need to create some bridge work. What is the body's role in this? Because somehow it's the body that trusts. There's something about the mind that filters that we aren't able to trust so much. So there's something in philosophy and there's something about the history of the sciences that holds this question, holds a story of how we might have lost this and how we are regaining it in our dance. Okay, so after those. So there's something about retrocausality. Time goes backwards, and like I hear this a lot, mostly in the inner dance sessions. It's like, how did you know to touch there? How did you know to say that? It wasn't just I needed to hear that. I was already seeing a reality, and then you spoke about it like you knew. So when we go into playlisting, the music, touch, the answer to a lot of questions, what do I do? How do I know? The answer is trust and retro causality. Okay, so causality is cause comes before the effect. The question comes before the answer. In a retrocausal universe, the answer comes before the question. The effect comes before the cause. Before it even happened, it's already happened somehow. So this is a dimensionality, and this is a new reality. It's a new earth. It's a new system of time and space that's coming to us. And this is what you're holding. So if you're going to be holding it, you need to be held by somehow the structure. So what is that structure? And is it actually possible that humans lived in a retrocausal reality so that we actually had to initiate ourselves into causality, into cause and effect, into deterministic, materialistic, three-dimensional. If this happens, that will follow logically in a train of events. So you can plan things according to your mind. But when you look at, say, not just babies, but animals, there are many organisms on Earth that are very retrocausal. Even before something happens, they have a sense. And they're using their body. They might even be using their emotions. They're using their sound. They're using their heightened sense of magnetism and electricity. They know how to listen to the ecosystem. They know how to listen to the patterns. And somehow we have formulated our brains because it was better to control the earth. Causality is really about what causes what. And the human story has really unraveled So we want to believe that I am causing my earth, my species, my culture, my family, my group is causing our reality much more than others. We are in control. We are the cause. In the indigenous, in the tribal sense, nature causes us. In the modern sense, we cause nature. So somehow we need to go back to this idea that Earth is causing us, but we cannot let go of the fact that we are causing Earth. So you need an understanding of causality that's not even retro or simply causal. It's both. It, we're interested in all of these directionalities, how these arrows would like collide with each other, interacting in a way that we're all causing each other. And when I say we, I'm not just talking about human beings. Everything in the universe is causing each other. You create any change in any one small part, and there will be a cascade of changes that will take place everywhere because somehow it's all connected in that way. Okay, so let's start simple. How do we even create you? How do you make you? Um, in the social sciences, in developmental psychology, in anthropology, there's always these questions. Do you create the environment? Does the environment create you? Is it, um, internal? Is it external? Is it constructivist? Is it socio-historical? Different models. Nature versus nurture is one of the big um, set of terms that tries to explain this. So where does it begin? Um, Based on the work and self-concept, we arrive at I am separate. I exist. I am a boy. I'm a girl. A self-concept is born. You become a self. And then you become a self-image. It's interesting to think of when was the first time you looked at the mirror. Um, Lacan calls it the mirror stage. That's when narcissism sets in. Like, when was the first time you were a vibration that looked at an image and decided, this is me? I suddenly became an externalized material extension of what was inside that didn't really bear a self image. So that brought about a greater distinction. You become more and more separate because you're not a vibration anymore. You are. So self concept wasn't enough in um, psychology to explain how we get to perceive ourselves as distinct, constant, separate beings. Self esteem is about how much you respect yourself. So as you go through the stages of development, as you become a social organism, you start to develop like like this one. This is a need, supposedly. Like if you don't have that, then you wouldn't self-actualize. You wouldn't find happiness. And this is important, self-efficacy. Self-efficacy describes how much do you believe that you can do it? Do you have low self-efficacy or do you have a high level of self-efficacy? And then how much do you know yourself? And then supposedly according to Maslow, this is the greatest need to actualize, to realize your raison d'etre, your reason for being here. Um, a lot of people come to inner dance especially with self-actualization in mind. This for me isn't always easy because when I came into my inner dance, I didn't actualize myself. I went more into what's called self-transcendence, which is to go beyond myself. What inner dance gives is your planet self, not just your person self. And this is what many humans are now yearning. Like, what am I beyond just my limited personal resources? What if I tap into something transcendent? So I think it's much easier to see this from a chakra perspective. Self esteem could belong to the blue, self love could be green, and self efficacy, which is about action, agency, power, is in the yellow. A lot of people approach healing work with self efficacy as a big question mark. Can I do it? Am, am I worth it? Am I good enough? We don't have to just look at um, spirituality and healing. There's an interesting relationality in the psychologies that have begun to understand that a lot of people are acting a lot. They're trying to drive themselves, to motivate themselves. I have to do it. I want to believe that I could do it. But so much of self-efficacy is actually being driven by low self-esteem and low self-love because people don't actually love themselves and they don't believe in themselves. Then that's why they're doing so much, you know? So in a way, some of the most successful people actually have very low self-esteem and they have very, very low self-love. So they cover up some of these insecurities with what's called success. So when you look at the other colors, they could be able to balance these out. Like, what is self-sustainability? What is self-knowledge? What is self-creation? Like, these are interesting to think about in the long term. And even in that video that we just watched, um, the woman was talking the language of colors. She talked about the indigo and then just everything becoming white. But then you do see her arms or her hands passing through her her energy body, healing what might be blocked, what might be drained, what might be imbalanced. That's so yeah, interesting in inner dance, isn't it? Like the body does itself. We're not coming from this need to shine, this need to be seen, need to be heard, need to actualize, which could be rooted in these injunctions and psychological drivers that were spoken to us. That you need to be this in order for you to be good. You need to be, you need to do this. You need to have this. You need to. All of these questions of lack, scarcity. You don't already have it inside you. You need to. There's something in the inner dance body that is not being driven by these needs, not being driven by lack, but more of I'm full. I am complete. I am abundant as I am. So there's something about the body moving on its own that knows what the mind is yet to catch up with. And and this is what trust means from a retrocausal space. There's something about the body that is very capable, is very able, is very effective, but it comes from the holding complete and full of all the other colors. Somehow there's a system there. There's a systematicity there. Um, so then I think we can enter why wisdom. I think what one question that will still keep cropping up, if it's not just body movement, the energy waves. It's like, how do I know what is true, what is real? You know, is it because I said it's true? Is it because like he said it's true or she said it's true? There's going to be a lot of this type of truth telling in an era of social media where people will be working on their identity process and will be experimenting with finding and expressing and living one's truth. Epistemology in philosophy is in charge of understanding, well, if you're claiming a truth, how well is it put together? Is it coherent? And how much does it actually interrelate with other truths out there? Is it just your truth? Or is it universal? Is it correspondent? And then, is it pragmatic? Is it functional? Does it work? Is it something we can practice? Does it lead to effect from the causality of all things? Is it practical? So I feel that we're going to go around in circles. We're going to reinvent the wheel on this. Like very often when people arrive at insight, even within the spiritual process, there will be some kind of newness and something that's actually quite old. And then we will come into these understandings of language, of the mind, of the body, of the brain, of music, and so on and so forth. And we would make a big deal about it. It's like, oh, okay, that hasn't been thought about before. This is like something new. That's true. But at the same time, we're actually repeating these thought systems, these gestures, these utterances are old. They've been done before. There's something about erasing all of these conditionings, all of these thought patterns, then starting new again. You become a baby, then you lose a lot of the continuity that time was holding as you enter into space. So one must come back to an epistemological framework. One must have lived through a global, you know, experience. That's what the energy gives. You become old. You remember. You retrieve your soul memories. And when that happens, you put things together. You bring coherence into the space. You bring correspondence into the space. And that takes some discipline to move from ontology, which is to become a self, and then to move into an epistemology is like a knowledge structure. How are you actually organizing your thoughts, your consciousness? Is there like a construct there, or is it just going to be based on what you feel every moment? Somehow your body is working with constructs as your mind. Um, we want to see how there is a split, a dichotomy or duality that's being healed in the inner dance process. We want to ask, what is that? Like, what is the nature of the split? How did we become separate? And how are we now healing the dualism that's coming into more like a monism? So there are different approaches to truth. One of the general sense is the rational and the, spiritual is a word used now because this is a spiritual context. It's either we approach truth through thought, or a lot of us are interested in just knowing it. It's like, I know it. I'm downloading it. I resonate with it. I don't know it, but I know it. You're going to hear this a lot, and you're going to be speaking to yourself quite a lot. I can't explain, I can't put it into words, but somehow I know, and I can come from this knowing with love, with with energy, with vibration. Why Descartes? Why do we keep coming up with this Cartesian system? Why do we keep looking at Descartes? Um, I find them really useful, and I do believe that we are somehow constantly repeating Descartes. And if you don't bring him up, we're just going to keep going into Cartesian thought. That which comes from Descartes is called Cartesian. Cartesian thought is known to be the forerunner for rationalism. So much of what we believe and think and practice now actually began with Descartes. That statement isn't really true. In a way, dualism didn't really start with him. A lot of people talk about Plato. Um, let's maybe look at this more from a drawing space. So, what did Descartes do? Um, Descartes is famous for these words, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore, I am. This is causal. When you look at that, there's a cause, and that leads to some kind of effect. So he has this huge coherent meditation. He calls it the first meditations. And this is what he supposedly gave us. And supposedly this had influenced the way we practice science and logic. He was a mathematician. So we wonder, how did he arrive at this? Like, how did he even come up with this? And what did that do? Supposedly this had led to what is called mind-body dualism. This is what had separated what might have been a gray area in the past when we were still in religion and um, the age of the mythical, tribal, or superstitious. Mind and body were one. How did Descartes succeed in separating these two, making them separate? Descartes was worried because he didn't know what was real anymore. You know, this is 600 years back. You can imagine, what did the world look like back then? What is real? Everything is supposed to be true according to what the great book says. But going deeper into that, like he wasn't satiated. Like he wanted to know more. But the more he looked, he didn't know what was real. So he had to look really deep into himself. Like, oh, okay, I don't know anything. So what he is partly famous for is the ability to go into a hyperbolical doubt. He was the great skeptic. And you might have experienced this in your own spiritual awakening where, okay, nothing is real. I don't know what to believe in. I look everywhere. I'm becoming the Buddha. Everything is Maya, the world of illusion. I'm canceling everything out. This is what my mom says, my dad, my boss, my brother, sister, brother, husband, wife, this and that. It's all, I'm looking at my phone and it's all bullshit. Bullshit, everything, as one lady from France often says in our trainings. So, yeah, she's French, like Descartes. So, skepticism holds a part in philosophy. Is it see? Skepticism holds a huge part somehow, and just me writing this probably triggers something in you. I know some of you have gone through this. Okay, I don't know what to believe in. So Descartes went into this. He he stated that, okay, there are many things that you can't trust. And one of the biggest ones that you cannot trust is your senses. The senses are arbitrary. What you sense today won't be what you sense tomorrow. So how can I trust my senses? So he canceled out senses. Okay, so in that way, you can see how he was able to create what is called the mind-body problem. He said, "This you cannot trust." So this holds truth. Um, and then he kept looking at the mind, and he kept looking at the mind. I have all these thoughts. I can't trust anything. What can I hold on to? What is the anchor? And the only thing his mind was constant with was he is in doubt. So I don't know what is real. The only thing I know is I'm doubting. And if I'm doubting, that probably means that because doubt is a form of thought. This is how we ended up with this grand equation, the cogito ergo sum. If I am doubting, therefore I am thinking, therefore I exist, I am. For anyone in an authentic spiritual awakening, this already is weird because he inverted it. Normally, if you're going to look at what's dominant, what's priority, normally being comes before knowing. But this is what Descartes did. He created this grand epistemological framework that prioritizes thought over being, prioritizes knowledge over existence. And so this is the reason why a lot of people need to go deep. When you haven't really found your love, your existential self, this is why people need to go deep. If you don't have a self, can you possibly even arrive at knowledge? This is why you go deep. This is why you're laying down to these playlists. This is why you're interested in this path. It's because if we haven't received the embrace, this process of being seen, if you weren't heard when you were young, when you weren't seen as you truly are, as a universal, good organism that is perfect as you were, complete, like you don't need to do anything. You are the universe. You are. Then you easily could have slipped into philosophy and you would start to see connections everywhere. But if you're disjointed, if you're entangled, if you're, unmade, if you're unseen, if you're unheard, you're still working on a project called self-concept, self-image, self-esteem, self-love, self-knowledge, self-actualization. You can't really transcend that project yet. So for that reason, people go deep. And that heals Cartesian Cartesianism. So in a way, it's kind of obvious what inner dance is doing. If you wanted to construct another worldview, so let's try to draw an Earth. I don't know if this looks like an Earth. If you wanted to, let's just put Earth there because I'm not a good artist. If you wanted to construct a new Earth, this and that, um, and we know that so much of rationality actually started with doubt. Understanding inner dance is a whole construct founded in trust. How would you remake the world, yourself, and the space between those? How would you reconstruct everything? You need to redo all of it from I think therefore I am. You're starting with I am, therefore I create, I sustain, I act, I love, I share, I speak, I know. So there's something about being that's coming through here, and it's not just the self being. The earth itself is saying, not I am. If we were to reconstruct Descartes, here's the other way in which he had it wrong. It's not I am, it's we are. This is what we can trust more. It's not coming from just a subjective personal thing. I'm old, I'm big, so I'm coming from all of us speaking, acting, moving through me. So, in that sense, Descartes is hugely important. You can't skip Descartes because you're healing the split. You're healing what is called the mind body problem. And it's useful for those who need to catch up with their philosophy to understand where did this begin, because that kept going, the separation kept going, and then somehow we began to unify this slowly. So this isn't so much a reality anymore for us. The mind is the body is energy, energy is thinking as itself, and the cycle shifts, and so on and so forth. Um, why did I put this here? Oh, okay, this is interesting, unexpected, but I want to go back to some previous slides. When you look at the differentiation between serotonin and dopamine, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's constructed here in the brain. So it's made here in the head. And when you look at serotonin, serotonin is what brings joy, not just pleasure, not just addiction, expectation, or anticipation. Serotonin is what brings happiness, what brings joy. And serotonin isn't created in the head, it's created here in the gut, it's in the intestines. So there's something about this patriarchy or this hierarchy where the head is always the metaphor for that which is higher. You would say the head of state or the head of the family. The head's always dominant. And when we're coming into our feminine, we're thinking, I can feel it in the gut. I can feel it somehow in the body and not from the mind. So somehow joy is um, more embodied than it is like mental or cognitive. So when you do look at the autonomic nervous system, very often we look at the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. What we don't talk about is there's actually a third autonomic nervous system. It's called the enteric nervous system, and it's there in your root. It's in your the base. It's in your gut. And when you tap into your issues of hunger and addiction, when you go beyond that, when you can tap into balance, joy, um, satisfaction, real satisfaction, we this is one interesting way to look at why are we going back to the body? Why are we not staying in the head? Okay, so we're looking at the nature of the problem. Problem. Um, Structuralism is interesting. I would need to bring this up because there's this opportunity to do so that we don't generalize. What is structuralism? So, okay, a lot of you remember Freud. Freud gave us this theory of the unconscious, which is really traumatizing. Like what he gave us was this idea that um, you're the tip of the iceberg. You know, this is what you see, and this is the unconscious. So, cognitive science does agree with this that what you are normally conscious of is that. And there are so many things operating that you can't really know because it's so much. My feeling is this is becoming the new conscious, and sometimes that's coming from chaos or coming from blanking out. Like you don't think you know, but there's actually like something non-linear or interdimensional coming through. And we've certainly discussed and listened to a lot of your experiences of this more and more. Um, we couldn't stay with Freud because we were bound to develop different understandings of what was before that. Um, an interest in the psyche. What was a psyche? So we were coming up with early branches of psychology. And then early structuralists started to see that, okay, I can't see the structure just with um, the science of the mind. I can't just think of the mind. Something else is holding the structure. And it was Jacques Lacan that spoke it. He said, language structures the unconscious. And that was huge. So suddenly, these two domains that are separate from each other started to speak in correspondence. Okay, what would that do? So a structuralism could be born. The study of language becomes a meta psychology where suddenly we perceive something, a matrix of thought, whether the language, action, um, and later on the brain. They didn't have as much access before. Slowly they were starting to. So they saw that there was a structure, and this is very often what we're looking at in inner dance. When you construct a playlist, you can either do it like this or like that. So what we're looking at suddenly is, okay, the mind looks like something, and we can negotiate, we can navigate this somehow. Now, structuralism then wouldn't stay just as a conglomeration of psychology and linguistics. What philosophy and science realized is there is a need to bring these separate elements that don't seem to be connected, the study of culture, the study of spirit, the study of language, the study of the mind, um, the study of the brain. There was this sudden thought that can I understand the mind simply on its own? Can I understand language as it is? Can I understand spirit? Can I understand culture? Can I understand the brain without looking at any of these? So structuralism really is more of a multi-dimensional look at everything, the study of the human, the study of consciousness. And obviously this would branch out in so many different ways, but what we're experiencing, whether you're studying it or not, is a heightened, um, elevated advancement of all of these, like this light language, this um, altered states of experience, this activated brain, this embodied wisdom, and an understanding of the human at its meta level. Where inner dance comes into the picture is when you bring all of these together. I was actually interested what's interesting here is scientists started to look at the body as an aspect of the mind. It's almost like the body was relegated to be lower, but somehow the body is becoming dominant. Like there's something about the body that we didn't look at properly. The body became evil, became material, became base. The body did not have the capacity to hold intelligence. So that when you look at the body mind just through religion, you know, how religion normally views the body as opposed to the mind, that there is an opposition and not a coherence or correspondence or congruence. So there's something about the spiritual awakening that is coming along with the sciences and philosophies is actually looking at how are they possibly the same. So in a way, when you do go into energy and healing and transformation, you will become interested in a lot of these because so many of the patterns that you perceive are structured separately and thus in combination with all of these. Well, what were some of the early insights in structuralism? Let me think. One of these would be um, structuralist man takes the object. This could be like a word, it could be a sound or an image. Takes the object and decomposes it, and then when you act upon what you have decomposed, let's say you digested it here in your enteric nervous system, when you re-articulate what you have received, then you recompose. What does that mean? In the past, before structuralism, when we received words, sounds, images, nothing really happens to the subject, to the person. There is no transformation. How structuralism begins to look at this from the most postmodern ways of looking at this is you cannot receive a word without transforming. You don't just receive it and bank it. You don't just receive a transmission. Okay, it's here and I store it. I put it inside my body box, my body container, and then nothing happens to me. I just keep it inside. The decomposition and recomposition process in structuralism, in a way, describes a transformation that takes place every time a self interacts with its environment. So suddenly there is no separation between these two. You need to understand every time you hear a word, a sentence, a paragraph, every time you learn a new activity, a new tool. Let's say you're learning how to playlist, you learn to put songs together, you put sounds together, you need to learn these new programs, these new apps. You actually need to transform your brain. You need to reorganize your brain in order to take that in. But where this would keep going with structuralism is it's not just in your brain where this is happening. You need to transform your whole body, or maybe even the whole energy field around your body, your whole society, your whole construct, in order to allow for the ontologizing, the existence of that one word, that one sentence, that one paragraph to become part of you, for there to be a real transformation to happen, you know? So that's actually what structuralism possibly holds um, for us. That's why we are bringing it forth. So the metaphysics of presence. I won't stay with these deep philosophical structures too much, but this is important. The metaphysics of presence is a Derridian term. It's from Jacques Derrida, and what he's basically saying is um, so much of philosophy in the Western tradition perceives time from the point of view of now, or what's called presence. From Aristotle all the way to Heidegger, um, when structuralism then went into a deconstruction, and then it was called post-structuralism, where so much of philosophy stopped is uh, Derrida didn't really believe that this ought to be the main point. What we hadn't acknowledged is space, which we speak a lot in the inner dance process. What about what is not present? What is, if the present is usually the positive, what about the negative? So when you keep talking about light, you are canceling out, the opposite of it. That we need to make more space. We need to create a, a constructive reality that takes space into consideration. We need to redefine time that is able to hold absence and is able to hold the negative and what is not here as something just as important. Um, and what would be mysterious is that um, a lot of that absence is, in fact, to be held by the body. It's almost like the mind body problem is what allowed us to keep acknowledging presence, but leaving out like absence. So much of philosophy could undergo a unification were we to go back to the body, in other words. So, as we looked at it before, the nature of the problem is because Descartes started with doubt and he canceled out sense. You cannot trust your senses, a dualism infiltrated, and then solipsism. Solipsism is interesting to watch out for. Solipsism describes I am the only mind in the universe. I don't care about what others think. I'm the only thing that exists. Descartes, like many thinkers, were guilty of that. So when you find yourself solipsistic, like, okay, I don't care. I don't care about what they think. I don't, you know, that is another product of Cartesianism and yeah, presence. So we're trying to build a new world. What is a post-Descartes world? Okay, you need to rebuild it according to trust. We need to know, okay, how do I construct if that is not just an emotion? What is a trust-based world? And how can I use what is the sense? You know, like let's go into Google. How many senses do we have? We go to school and we're taught we have these five senses, but suddenly you open these and say, okay, we actually have more than just what Aristotle initially gave us. We have equilibrioception would be the sense of balance. Proprioception, very inner dance, knowing which parts of your body are where without looking. So just by laying down on the yoga mat, you're tapping into proprioception. How inner dancey is that? The sense of movement, the sense of temperature, your body gets hot and cold. That's interesting. Chronoception, um, electroception, magnetoreception, and so on and so forth. So you can see still what Descartes did by canceling out what is sensible. That's how we got stuck with our heads, you know? So to rebuild the world, if it's going to be based in trust, you need to access your senses again. And you are sensing the world intensely and intensively through the practice that we're holding. You want to, who was it that gave us body mind? Who was the founder of pragmatism? John Dewey. He called it the body mind. A lot of people are using this term in inner dance more and more. So instead of solipsism, you need to acknowledge that everything that is there exists. You know, you don't invalidate anyone or anything. And a lot of people have been doing this even in spiritual process. If you don't exist, you're an illusion. I don't care. I don't take feedback. The post-Cartesian world, if you're in a trust, then you need to acknowledge everything. You need to allow for the negativity, the absent presence that is not just in the positive here and now. Okay, so yeah, we're looking at those problems. We don't have to solve them. We can look at them. They would solve themselves probably. So we're going into a paradigm shift. This is the classic model. In the Cartesian model, there's a separation where the environment works on you and you don't work so much on the environment. Where this is headed is um, there's something about when you look at this physical activity, the movement, the dance between the self and the environment allows us to see the body taking on a new role. The body mediates um, what is going on inside and outside. And we now need to honor honor not just the body but the movement of the body. There's something about the body moving, action, reaction, emotion. There's something about the movement, even in education. um, Integrative learning needs to incorporate movement as a really important aspect of consciousness. You cannot really think without moving. It is through the original ways you moved your body as a child that allowed you to conceptualize. So we'll look at that later in terms of what that means. So yeah, like the mind and body were separate. This is more of what Plato did, that the mind consists of spiritual essences, the body consists of physical essences. I think we're seeking to correct that. So this is what the cognitive sciences look like. Um, when you bring all of these together, this is the new psychology. You cannot psychologize without understanding. And AI is there simply to look at how is information networked, not just in a computer, but also in consciousness. This is where the sciences are at. There is a mandala, there is a chakra system in the sciences where structuralism actually really is happening. And if you don't join this game, if you don't join this mapping, you will lose out. Primarily because a lot of these are looking at the body in very strange and new ways. And in fact, one of the main interest points in the cognitive sciences is music. Now they're asking, what is music doing? How is music transforming consciousness? So in this way, the body and the mind are actually being healed. Let's see if we would look at what that means beyond this picture. What is embodied cognition? Firstly, we were once taught mind is disembodied. So, what does it mean that mind becomes embodied? Embodiment is a word that you would keep hearing more and more. Um, I think this is too complex. I just wrote these. So, thought formulates initially in the body. Okay, this is important. We could draw this out through our sensorial concrete experiences. Let's look at this. Okay. So you know what? Where's my pen? There. You know what translation means? Translation means you start from a source domain. So let's say the source domain is you're reading Chinese text, and let's say you don't know how to read Chinese. So you would need to bring something from the source text into the target source domain to the target domain. So, okay, I understand English or Dutch or Lithuanian or German. So there needs to be a journey that allows the meaning structures within one domain to transform, to undergo a transformation into another domain. So what is that in the inner dance process? Um, okay, you still have these terminologies within the cognitive sciences, especially in embodied cognition is interesting. Um, the source is the body, and the target is thought. What does this mean? For you to arrive at a thought, you first had to sense it from the point of view of um, the body. The body had to see it first before you develop the thought. A thought could be like any word, could be like, okay, even baby. A baby doesn't really understand baby until it develops enough to separate itself from its babiness, to, see itself from the outside. And it could be baby, it could be mother. It's a presence, but it's still a thought. Dad, milk, poop. For you to take on a word, let's say, for you to even think of baby or mother with that, is it possible to do that without sensing it from this? Before you can integrate or condense like all of it from all senses, the body had to come first. And so this is what toddlers do. This is what babies do. In the beginning, the baby doesn't really work with these. In the beginning, the baby works with these. Everything is sensible. Everything, you take everything in. You don't name, you don't make definitions, you don't categorize. And then slowly, right at about the age of this or this, you begin to encapsulate or contain like all of these, and really the dance, movement, action, reaction, the way you're moving your body, um, is that which allows all of these to in fact become possible. So that's translation from the embodiment perspective. So then when you look at language, um, how does this work? How do we translate energy into language? When a lot of people say, okay, you can't put that into words. It's spiritual. It's energy. I can't translate it. But that's what words do. It's exactly doing that. It's translating the energy into containers. Um, so the question is here is how do you create a thought? How do you even construct a thought? And this is what embodied cognition is more or less giving us. I think we would need to look at this concretely, but let's look at that word actually. The body thinks in concrete terms. It needs to see it. It needs to feel it. It needs to hear it in order to know it. And then thinking happens in dimensions that are abstract. Okay, let's look at examples. So let's take a word. Let's say this is a word. You look at that word. I want to ask you, do you know that word? Do you have a sense of that word? Do you know that word? Okay, now think of that word and then think of the sound of that word. That's still possible. Truth has a sound. But then what is the real sound of truth? And then think of the color of truth. Think of the texture of truth. You know? Think of the magnetism. Think of the temperature of truth. Think of the shapes, the geometries of truth. It won't really have any of those attributes because truth is an abstract um, entity. It's a thought. And think of then all of the, no, that's not a good example. So let's say, same with freedom. You know what that is. You know, you have a definition for that word. You can describe it, but you don't know the color. You don't have a texture unless you do. Maybe you do know freedom. Maybe freedom is your best friend and you have coffee in Starbucks with freedom every day. But for most people, freedom is an abstract. So is it one of the questions is it possible to construct this without all of the experiences that were not, let's say, freedom? Let's say, think of something that's the opposite of freedom. So think of this from an old, deep history space. How did we construct this entity, this ontological being? Did you do it? You know, like how many layers, how many events, how much ancestry, how many ancestors had to experience the opposite of freedom in order to construct freedom? How many people exist in uh, absence, so that this could be present? So that when you do go into the inner dance process and something is showing up, making itself known, it's usually the opposite of the thing that you're looking at that is talking to you, the negative, the, what you don't want to look at is showing up with what you want to look at, like usually. So that's how we construct a thought from a deep historical sense. That's true structuralism at work. And imprisonment is definitely something the body would know a lot more than the mind. So that when you look at, okay, there are these metaphors in thought. A metaphor is when you can describe something through something else. So let's say, let's take another abstract thought, like love. Do you know what love looks like? At least love has a color for most people. It's color red for most people, and it's warm, but still, it's abstract. So, in consciousness, if language structures the unconscious, um, if love is the target domain, because the target is normally it had to have come from something concrete. And in language, in most languages in the world, the actual concrete sensory experience of love is actually like a journey. When you look at it in the beginning, okay, I don't get that. How is love a journey? So in language, when you do describe love, what you would find is okay, here is an index of metaphors. These are very interesting correlations within language and thought that's embodied. You literally can look at the body and um, you would see the interrelations from the point of view of emotions, and trying to look at love is a journey. So when people say, okay, this relationship isn't going anywhere, we're in a dead end, we're in a crossroads, you have to keep moving, it's, this is spinning its wheels, it's gone off track. It's almost like love is a movement from one place to another. Um, and that we couldn't have arrived at love. For me, when I interpret this, what I see is actually like you're moving from from self to the other in a way that um, this could be reflexive somehow. Um, but this is just one of the more common examples of how the body knows more than the mind. So you can keep thinking of love, but somehow from brain, breath, and blood, um, and emotions and cells and DNA, um, this is what made this possible somehow. There's something mysterious in deep story that interrelates this. So this is interesting. It sounds a little complex. So what I would do is I would further simplify this. So within a conceptual metaphor, I just described the metaphor. What you have are um, more basic primitives. The basic primitives are the first building blocks that allow us to understand what we perceive. So here are examples: a path, a container, a thing, or contact. Let's go back to the drawing board on this. So um, if you spend time with babies, what are the first things babies do? This is one of the first things a baby needs to do in order to construct thought systems, possibly. They would take like a thing, okay, this is a thing, and then they would look for a container. And then they would put the thing inside the container, and then they would put it outside the container, and then they'd put the thing inside the container. They need to do this with their body so that later they could do this with their mind. Let's look at some examples of this. Ideas are objects, for example. Okay, like Sally gave the idea to Sam, or she took the idea from Sam. Ideas here become objects, but it may as well be like a container. Like I took the idea into Sam, just by changing the statement even a little bit. Like Sam took the idea and held it inside. What this is speaking is before you can even speak these, you needed to experience that um, as a baby. Without these, and without these, So going back to this example of love is a journey, um, one of the spatial primitives that you need to incorporate is source, path, goal. Okay, these are three primitives. You stand here, and then you walk towards there, and then you're there at the goal. So a baby needs to crawl and walk from A to B, for there to be even the possibility of a journey to happen. This is how the body thinks. This is not how the mind thinks. So when you go on a walk, when you go on a walk, you walk from there to here and then from here to there. You're doing something. Your body is thinking without your mind having to operate. So this is what the body does. It could be from like temperature, volume, big and small, up or down, high or low. When you then watch these images of people doing stuff with their bodies, they're thinking with their body. So I want to look at another video with you. Um, I want to observe this woman with you who will, um, now that we've gone over these different um, concepts, I want you to listen to her body. You can listen a little bit to her words, but listen to what her body is speaking. And if you have a notebook with you, maybe even write down what is the body speaking that's just being reflected in the words before these um, concepts that are emotional and value based, even judgment based. What's the body speaking here?
And throughout this inner dance last night, the power of yellow made me realize like I could create things. And I've been struggling with that, you know. And for me, yellow has always been power. And I was able to create what I had wanted, at least for the immediate future. And I was like drawing, I was painting it with my hands. I could feel like energy like shooting from my fingertips, and I could even visualize and all the visualize like the partner, the job, like how much I needed to get paid, like when I wanted to start, and then later on it shifted to how can I be of service? Like I'm being called to service, so I was like, how can I be of service? And you had mentioned earlier the blue stone, like we're looking for a blue stone. And look at my right hand, and I saw this stone, like this thing spinning, something blue, like gem-like. I'm like, what is this? And I remember what you said, and it started growing and growing and growing. And it was this big thing. I was helping it grow. I was like moving it, and I realized it was Maya, which was the new earth. And I was like, what's my role in this? And lately, for the past few weeks, I've been working through my heart, and the energy has been coming from it. It's a deep pink. I call it my deep pink big love. And during the inner dance, that came out, and infusing deep pink into this blue, and I completely threaded through it. And my role was to infuse Maya with love. Just love, the whole thing covered in love. Until it got so big that I couldn't contain it. I just had to be like this. The images that came to me were very strong. It started with the sun. It started with the sun. It started with an orange center, and then yellow, and becoming white. I saw a canopy of trees, so all green, and then the deep blue oceans. And then I had in my hand an egg, and it turned into a dove, and then a swan. I had a yellow butterfly and a white butterfly in each hand. And I combined both, and what came out was a butterfly with emerald blue wings edged with black. And it just multiplied, and like I was surrounded by butterflies of that color. Kind of showered over me. And then I thought it was over, you know. I was like, okay, this is huge already. I turned on my side and became like a baby. And I started crying because I felt so vulnerable. I felt so anxious and afraid and defenseless, and yeah, I was so scared. And then I remembered yellow. And in my hand was this ball, like a ball of light. And I knew like it was there, like I just had to gather up the strength to just take it up and accept it and receive it, you know. And that yellow started growing and growing to this thing, and it became gold. And when it became big enough, I turned and I was able to take it in. Took it from the crown of my head all the way all over to the tips of my toes and then bring it back up again. And as it was coming down, it was like gold, 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 then became yellow. So as it went down, it became more yellow, less gold. And I brought it up again, and I knew it was like my will making that, like I've chosen to do this. And then I ended up here, and it became bigger and bigger and bigger. This huge ball of gold from the yellow. And I was blessing everyone. I was sending it out to everyone and everything. Like I feel like my fingertips, even as I speak, just shooting energy. So just blessing, blessing, blessing. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm done. So finally I lay down there. I couldn't move. I'm like, I'm spent. Like there's, what else can I do, you know? And I just couldn't move. I wasn't sleeping. I just couldn't move.
Okay, so um, oh, we're not done with the screen. Mm, there's a system here that begins with the embodied mind that then needs to be mediated into a thought process that is able to hold that much, that will not fragment and limit nor create separation, because everything is connected somehow. So based on this question that was sent today, like how do you map, how do you construct a body mapping? Um, for me, the baby body language is easy. It's like verticality is high and low. So you can tell when someone is working on the process of volume, where, okay, I feel empty and now I feel I need to fill myself. So going into that example of the containment metaphor, right? Like, I think it was in the first video where she was constantly taking things from out and then putting things in, taking things from out and taking them in. That's a containment um, movement. That's the containment process. One of the more common would then be the opposite of the containment, which is like, you know, throwing things out. Sorry, I'm not. I need to share my screen. Containment would be this, and then release, throwing out is like this. Is it true that there really is garbage and trash inside that needs to be taken out? No. The body is irreducible. The body is complete. The body is perfect as it is. But because of inactivism, because of embodied cognition, because of what's been stored, that's a pattern, there needs to be a ritual of removing that which has been put into the container. So it's like the old wise man or old wise woman coming together with the baby takes place. What happens beyond or beneath thought is are these really, really simple spatial primitives and image schemas and embodied metaphors. And you don't need to know it if you don't need to hold this in a scientific way. But still, the body is speaking um, lack or abundant, high or low, hot or cold, open or closed. So what I do as a facilitator is I watch, I look. Is there something that wishes to extend or expand? So I would create the conditions where that could happen. I wouldn't go there and then do this and do, I don't need to do that. I would rather the body finds just the conditions that allows itself to get there. And when you watch these videos, I'm not doing anything. I'm just creating the space where like wholeness, fullness, integration could happen. I could do that through music. I could do that mostly through proprioception. It's a way of positioning the body. So something you would notice in these videos is the women stood up. So verticality as opposed to horizontality is a movement from space into time. Um, so there there's a lot of value in getting to understand the language of the body in this way. But then what you hear when you listen to these women is, why do they speak in color? What is the system of the colors? Does it actually mean anything? So for me, the colors mediate because the image still needs to come in through sound. Why do the colors come up? Let's I wasn't really thinking of explaining this as it wasn't in the slides, but okay, there's a difference between a hot and a cool media. A cool media is the type of medium where the different sensory registers are kind of soft and cool and equal to each other. So when it comes to, let's say, sound, image, you don't really need to.
By share the
Oh,
screen that you're drawing on.
thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sana. Mm, there. Yeah, yeah. So, let's say movement. It could be any of the senses, and so on and so forth. Okay, temperature. So when you have a hot medium, it means that, let's say, this becomes very high definition as opposed to, let's say, okay, this is image, this is, so let's say, for example, you put on virtual reality glasses. So there's a lot of sound and then there's a lot of image, really messy. That's how a hot and cool media differentiates. So inner dance is kind of a hot medium in a way that the image is reduced and sound is high definition, image is low definition. So what happens is when you create big sound and you take out this, you ask people to close their eyes, what would happen is this would come up independently on its own, where instead of feeding people images, let's say you take them to an IMAX movie theater and you give them super big images and they have to watch it. This is when the mind doesn't need to think on its own anymore. You just go into the spectacle. You view the spectacular and you're thinking, your mind stops. There's a dependency that happens. So here, when you allow this to possibly come in its own, when you then think of color, when the colors come up, because the colors aren't coming from the physical eyes. It's coming from the non-physical eye, the metaphysical eye. The colors mean something. The colors represent abstract elements. They're actually thought systems, but holding more of um, the vibratory. So let's say here's an example of, um, I'll give you this Prezi, so you don't have to like, copy everything. Um, when these women were speaking, I do have a system of a rainbow. So when I speak to them, when I use words, and when I listen to them, I can tell where is the blockage. So in this last video, this woman was talking about the yellow a lot, and she felt like, okay, I've been stuck. I haven't been able to create my reality. So to construct a process, there needs to be a movement from here to there. Without that movement, there is no transformation. So just look at the red here. If this is what you're hearing, okay, someone is coming from lack or scarcity. If I don't move them into this holistic red, that everything you need is already here. Your body is amazing, it can self heal. There is no transformation. So everything that I do, and I can't explain that simply using the music, using words, using the moment. There has to be a movement from, let's say, feeling powerless into you are powerful. There has to be those movements, and the thing is you need to create a cascade where all of these are going to be transforming at the same time. I'm bringing this up because I speak to this more largely through the body. I'm not speaking to the mind when I bring about the inner dance space. So when I ask a body to lay down, um, initially actually the body would look like this. So all I do is get, get this to happen. I extend that, and then I extend this, and then I raise this. So what I'm speaking about is I have a system of, let's say you have a glass here, and some people will be pretty much like, this is my glass, because I grew up in conditions where I'm not enough and I'm small and I'm little. So to give them this understanding that the glass is actually full, I need to coordinate that with embodied cognition. So if the body is used to being small, what I need to configure is how do I allow this to experience big? The movements come secondary. I don't care if the movements come or not. I would just watch based on how they're breathing, how what are their eyes doing while their eyes are closed. What's the heartbeat telling me? So especially proprioception. How are they positioning their bodies? As soon as they walk into the space, you can already feel it. So at the last minute, when I do my music live, I would choose particular songs. I would choose song elements that would speak to the nature of these. I literally would look for, okay, where are they the most stuck? I mean, sometimes there's going to be 10 or 20 people there, but where does it average? Are they experiencing it? All of these are a matter of lack, right? It's like blockage in the red would be lack of resources, lack of freedom, lack of power, lack of love, lack of communication and truth, lack of information, lack of knowledge, and lack of connection. So you just need to literally speak to them that there's no lack, there's no scarcity, everything is full. And you need to hold that container, you need to hold that space so that they can move to that. And um, because of embodied cognition, you need to speak that more through the body initially. And waveforms, vibrations will speak that a lot louder than any other system. So you may not even need so much of the qualitative, subjectivist elements that words hold. I mean that's a system that I can at least share that would be Inner Dance's contribution to how we could possibly arrive at this, where the body is holding a possible structuralism, like because lack can happen within the way we speak, the way we integrate all of our belief systems, in the way we hold our mind, how we network information, the way we're holding the brain. Um, so I feel those colors are going to be important. Those colors are important somehow. We could talk about it. So yeah, I think I want to close this talk soon. There are different projects in embodiment. I don't know what this box is. We need to understand the role of movement more. And I believe that science is only coming into this recently. I don't think we understood what the movements really meant before now. I feel inner dance, along with many other modalities, are making us look closer to the nature of how we move the body, or more easily, like how we position. So anyone who was a child who was told, okay, stop moving, stay there, that's not what good girls or good boys do, behave, sit down, read that book, sit beside your classmate, don't talk, don't think, you know, don't act. The body was colonized, the body was imprisoned. Um, so if you want to liberate, if you want to liberate thought, liberate the mind, understanding all of our concepts actually started with that, then all of these amazing new schooling paradigms is honoring play, the ability to move across the space really is about it. When you can't move across the space freely, that means your mind gets imprisoned and becomes dense. So in that way, the practice that we do is liberating people from the ground up, from the way we're asking them to go into the most basic primitives, and then allowing like something to move from that to something more complex. Movement movement was, there's no coincidence that people are going to the ecstatic dance. This I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to move the way I need to, because I'm free. And we didn't understand, but that is actually a cognitive structuralism. We're forming a new mind, and we need to start from here first. And you've been trusting that. We need to understand senses more, especially now. We understand there's so many more senses that we didn't track. Sense of balance, sense of pleasure, sense of humor, sense of light, sense of, sense of pain. So you're heightening these senses, and all of these are operating simultaneously in a heightened state, all at the same time. So don't think it's just one. When you're sensing the world, all of these senses are telling you something. Learn to listen. Back to metaphor, you're going to be making a lot of connections when you send electricity through your system. These neural synaptic explosions that are taking place regularly in your system will create networks inside. So emotion is also key. So emotion is retro causation. To go back to um, this, emotion plays a big role in this. Emotion is a way of knowing before it's happened. And when you learn to desensitize emotion so that you could still have emotion there, it's energy in motion. And emotion is actually a cognition, it's a body based cognition. You know, it's your body knowing ahead what your mind has yet to catch up to. So, realizing usually when we look at emotion, emotion is like the absence of thinking. It's to be emotional. It's to be not rational. But in a post-Cartesian world, emotion actually is more heightened, retrocausal, trust-based. Um, yeah, like reality. Oh, what's that? I think I put something there. Why did I put this here? Okay. Most people are.
We don't see the screen,
Oh,
right?
oh, sorry. Yeah. Go back to Zoom. Share screen. Yeah. So that's the screen. I was wondering why I put that there. So most people are trichromats. That means that you have three color cones in your eyes. This technically supposedly can only happen in women where there's a fourth color cone. So women actually see more colors than men. But I've been listening to more and more men, especially when we went to Europe the last months, where the men were saying, I'm seeing a color and I've never seen it before. So we're literally changing our eyes. We're changing the way we're seeing the world, which means you're literally changing your eyes and you're becoming more sensitive to a fourth color cone, and that makes you a tetrachromat. Um, so I think we might perceive a very different um, color system here if we are to get to this point of seeing everything from not scarcity or lack or wholeness. You have to change your eyes, which means you need to go into a different dimensionality of seeing that allows this to be real. So I'm interested in going into a conversation with you. Um, we have maybe 45 minutes. Things that you started to think about that your body was doing that you realize was wisdom, like body wisdom, like you may not have noticed it before, but naming it, bringing it into visibility. So it could be that there could be also a question, but I'm interested more in like insight and realization, maybe aha moments as to the role the body possibly plays. And this is not an overnight conversation. This is deep study here, um, where a lot of these that I'm sharing are actually quite new. So there's a spirituality within science that's coordinating with the science within spirituality that's bringing a lot of these together into a one space. So I'll mute and see if you guys might have like, please share anything. Don't be shy.
Hi. Um, yeah, I wanted to share two things. What I've been feeling in my process is that, well, the healing goes through layers, and there are layers both in the body and in the mind. So right now, for example, I'm still healing the first chakra area, second chakra area, like all the body still, and the mind. So it hasn't happened that one part of the body has been healed and not the others. That's one thing, or that the brain has healed and not the body. And lately, when I have reached some understandings of something, I have understood something about my life, what happened was that I felt a veil in the eyes lifting up, like really that there was a veil and it disappeared. And that has happened twice or 3 times. I just wanted to share that. Thank you very much for
Yeah, I
everything.
appreciate that. What I really like about your process or Isabel's process is um, you've been doing a lot of spiritual and healing work, but there's something about the accessing of one's language that allows one to access one's thought. So Isabel is a lawyer from Spain, and when something comes up, there's like an intuition. One needs to bring it out in order for something to be looked at. This is another important perspective within structuralism, I think, that belongs more in developmental psychology. So, okay, let's try it. I can't draw a baby. Okay, that's a baby, cute. Um, and then there's like a middle space where the baby becomes like an adult. So before this happens, there needs to be like a mediation. So babies in the developmental thought of Jean Piaget anyway, are very public, and in that way they're honest. When they want to express something, they never express it outside. They have to they never express it inside, they have to make it public. So when they make like these sounds, when they move their body, they're expressing everything that they're feeling. They cannot think internally. So somehow when we discover language, what is language? Words are what you might call placeholders. And you know, like a box is a placeholder, so you can contain meaning inside that box. You can put the sounds inside that box. So when you say a word, there's a lot of elements inside that one box, which is actually amazing. So now this brain, this mind, or the embodied mind, which is the whole body, is filled with all of these boxes, and they're all networked together. You know, this is connected to this box, and just chaos of meanings. That's what words are able to do. So when small children start to discover thought, they have to keep repeating words, the same words, before they can establish quiet thought. They need to keep repeating the same sounds, and those sounds become actual words that convey meaning. So, one of the healings that happen when we go into what's called egocentric speech, which is the thought systems of toddlers, of 3-year-olds. that have not yet learned how to keep things in secret. To heal is to make things public again. It's to take a lot of which was hidden, locked inside the body. If you're gonna make all of that, if you're gonna release all of that, it needs to go public. So one way that can happen, because you can't just speak everything out loud, because you won't always have the environment. That's what I'm speaking about, Isabel. She can speak her truth easily, and that's very transformative. But for a lot of people, that actually needs to happen in the body. So when the body is moving in that way, whether it be internally or externally, it's actually a kind of language. It's speech. It's it's a taking things out of the containers or the placeholders. It's speaking the unspoken. So in a way, when we become like children, this is what's happening. So a lot of us are experimenting with when something needs to be said, we don't like to keep it in. We need to put it out there, because that is a part of the offloading experience that will one day happen in death. When you die, you will release all of what has been like inloaded. You will offload. Um, there's a role in the body movement. This is one of the explanations as to why does the body move like that. It's to have that kind of conversation in a dimensionality that is a lot more than what language can sometimes hold. So yeah, I think it's very, very process oriented where language, movement, energy, it all kind of plays a part. So that's another way of looking at structuralism, for us to either understand it within ourselves or to explain it to others. What is what are these manifestations? Why are they doing that, which is happening? Okay, thank you.
Uh,
Anyone else? Go ahead.
I want to add something, if I may. And um, it's I've been listening to many playlists now, and well, they are really helpful. And what I feel is that they work fast, really fast. Like, yeah, it's a fast way of healing, a really fast way of healing. Well, anyway, in the last days, instead of doing this speech without meaning, this what's called light language, what I was doing was moving the mouth as if I were speaking, and sometimes I felt it had a sound, a specific sound that was not verbalized, but other times it was just moving the mouth as if speech was going on, but or sound was going on, but with no specific sound. I couldn't, and for me that was very interesting, because I don't know if the next step is not even moving the mouth. Right now I need to move the mouth. But yeah, well, thank you for all the playlists. They are absolutely
Amazing.
great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is valuable feedback, because what goes into the playlists are a lot of spatial primitives that speak the language of the body. Um, I normally would bring up my iPhone here and show you the noise app, where a lot of the noises have correspondences with specific um, issues.
Why something happened with your volume?
Yeah, I changed. I see why. I changed my earphones and I forgot to change the mic. My ears hurt with this one. Um, yeah, there's like an art to it, and more we're learning to hold the sound elements in a way that has correspondences with the different issues that possibly might be happening in people's bodies. I think we can talk about that in another Zoom call. Okay. Yeah, anyone else would like to speak?
Yeah, bye. What I want to share is that what happens oftentimes in a session is when I lay down that I get contractions and that I have the sensation that I give birth. And for me, I always have this. For me, it means that I give birth to myself or to some new piece of myself. Yeah, that's what comes up now for me to share.
So I have this experience when I'm listening to the music where like it feels like a bolt of lightning just shoots through my body and it creates like a jerking motion where I kind of just jerk to the side. And even after the music stops playing, like I could be lying in bed, kind of going to sleep, and my whole entire body will kind of like crunch in half, like I'm doing a sit up kind of out of the blue all of a sudden. And I feel through the whole night like these waves of energy moving through my body and colors coming in, and sometimes they're coming in from the right and they're coming in from the left, and I feel like they're kind of synchronizing my brain in some way, or the two halves of my body in some way. And sometimes there are a lot of visions of, I have no idea what I'm looking at, but they're pretty detailed. And sometimes I feel like I have like it looks like a sun, like a beautiful sun inside of my body, and these very, very intricate, almost looks like gold filigree images that come. And I could go on and on, but it's really interesting. And all of these feelings and light and color are all like interacting with my body, and my body like does these really interesting things, kind of in coordination with this, what feels like a dance that's happening inside of my body. And it's just so beautiful. And I just felt to share that. Thank any of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, there's something there that it's still up to use, which I find productive and useful. So, still within structuralism, when let's say this is what's happening in the world, and this is what's happening inside of ourselves. A lot of what happens here is based on what's happening here. So when we look at the structured activity where there's this decomposition happening, it's just put composition here. It's either decomposition or recomposition, but there's a compositioning happening here. We can't prioritize one over the other. And I think what that is saying is it's really important what we expose ourselves to. There are a lot of people who would end up shopping around for what is the spiritual community I want to be part of. And I lived in the US several times. I lived in the Bay Area, and you hang out with people near San Francisco. They're into everything. You see them at a rave party, or you see them in some kind of hippie commune space, or you see them in an ecological space. So they wear these many hats. And then when you travel to these other places that um, aren't so San Francisco, like places in Asia that are more conservative, a lot of these things that are taken for granted are pretty new. So people tend to go shopping for, okay, what's the next workshop? Who's the next guru or teacher? What is the next modality that I try on? All of which probably do different things. And all of these different elements have specific terms, specific paradigms, specific perspectives of seeing the world. So what you take in from the outside, all of these terms will then reflect on what would happen like inside. Um, we're using the playlists as a language process, so that would then interrelate inside what might be happening from outside, which we hope is reflective of what is universe and what is earth, and not just what is limited, so on and so forth. Um, so a lot of people are working in language. Language could be in different forms. If it's spoken language, um, let's say, okay, I want to work on my ability to speak, but is it actually possible to do this if you don't know how to hear properly? Um, a lot of people are interested in, actually, this should be the other way around. They want to know how to express themselves in the written word, but is that actually possible without learning how to do this? So you take things in, and then structuralism means you put something out. It, this should be the other way around. For you to be able to output, you need to input. In other words, there has to be a cross sectioning of the two. So this is why we're studying. This is why we're listening. This is why we're taking in what the person doesn't know that the planet might know. And the playlists are more or less this. Um, this is what we aspire to, that they are coming from the global experience and what it's, so yeah, the playlists are a product of listening to so much of what has spoken through the collective body. That's speaking of like a really, really big story. Um, so a lot of you are absorbing like a lot, and there's a reason for that. So that when you then it becomes your turn to express, to express whether it be through words or through nonverbal means. When your body is that which speaks its truths, when you intuitively go out there and hold the space, it's because you heard the space. You listened to a lot. And so for that reason, that's why we are using some of these mechanisms. Because we also don't know how to listen to vibrations as much. Through the mind-body dualism, we don't know how to hold the vibrations as well as we could have as animals or tribal people. Thank you, Cindy. Anyone else?
Hello, Pi. I'm not in a very good, it's very noisy place. I'm sorry, but well, first of all, thank you so much for this. Wow, this opening to this seas, and also bringing more space to the ocean that is inner dance. I'm very, very inspired, and I'm super curious. Well, I would like to share something and asking something. If I understood properly, or I'm getting something, so if I can try to having a feedback from you. So all this structuralism, all this important understanding of the origin, how we build, how is the basic language of the body, how we construct the reality that we are experiencing. Maybe we are in jail, some cases of the same reality that we were building. So it's in the end, what is this giving us the opportunity is about to becoming a super conscious primitive being. The body is returning to the primitive state, the original state, but holding the consciousness that the journey of life is going forward. This paradoxical stage between super conscious that wants to be the universe through us, and also the innocent primitive that we have to return to the state of Mother Earth and universe in connection in itself. So I just want to share that concept. If maybe you have some input from there, and I will, and if after that I can share the question that I have. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, really powerful words and thoughts there, Oscar. Um, yeah, I believe in this totally, that this is where we're going. And um, what we're learning to do now, what we're taking great care to hold, is the critical point. There's almost like a critical moment here, that we're watching out for. Because, you know, person, spirit is mediated by, like, by a lot of things. So um, we brought up trust a lot, and the opposite of trust is doubt. So if we could get crazy enough that we would even trust our doubt, going back to Cartesianism, Descartes, who doubted everything. Doubt almost belongs to the spiritual experience. Like, that's what Buddha did. He doubted the nature of the material world, so then he could construct a metaphysical understanding of that which is not material. Um, it's just like what Descartes did. So if you trusted doubt, doubt has, I think, two edges. Um, when you look at Buddhism, what Buddhism doubts is the nature of the external world. You can call it Maya, the world of illusion. So that the world is not real, that we doubt it. And when you look at a lot of conspiracy theorists and skeptics out there that are really kind of holding a post-modernist anger, um, there's this skepticism, there's this global skepticism. People don't know who to trust. They don't know if they can trust the government, the doctors. They don't know if they can trust the corporations. That there's a healthy doubt in that. And then what Western tradition then doubts as the opposite is not so much the world, but consciousness. From the Freudian all the way to, it was phenomenology that started to trust consciousness. But from the Western point of view, in the East or in the South, when you die, what will go away is this one, and what will be left is consciousness. And when you look at how the West understands it, even from a semi-religious point of view, when there's death, what goes away is this, what is left is the world. The world has continuity. And so there's a theory of evolution that's very realistic, as opposed to, let's say, the Eastern or Buddhist or shamanic perspective, where even after death, something will stay. So I think we are allowed to cancel out this. Yeah, okay, that doesn't exist. There's an ego death, and that doesn't exist. The world is an illusion. But I think there's another space that has to enter, where we would need to trust both. We would need to trust, okay, I am okay. I am a good person. I am amazing. I am cool. And then, okay, the world is interesting too, and I'm not so angry anymore, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. To envelop ourselves in a way that we validate, we don't cancel out, we validate self and world. This is where I think beauty, intelligence, genius, super consciousness can happen. And if this is not the case, if we give into the trappings of doubt, I think there's an ego centrism. There's a spiritual ego that could come about if we don't hold the space well. Um, so I think that's really what's going to be happening globally, and I'm glad we're able to talk about this. A lot of people will be conspiracy theorizing. I can't trust this. I can't trust that. Let that happen, because that is a cleansing. That is an emptying out. And then, okay, this is God. And all of those are gods, and everything is God. So what is God? God is a placeholder. It's the first causality. We needed an explanation as to why things were happening. And through mythology, we had all these different gods. Okay, there's a god of thunder, god of this. So we decided, okay, let's just put all of that into a one space, so that we can have a reason for why everything is happening. So there could be a one story. And that was a great organizer that allowed society to level up. Before that, we can just kill each other, eat. We were talking about it here, like there were these cannibals who were eating each other. So religion played a part in providing an initial causality that brought about like an order of things. But religion wasn't enough, because in a way we also had to incorporate what had been externalized, that this now needs to reflect in, like, within us. So we need to reshape paradigms, frameworks, so that we can hold like another system. We need another causality, and it's not going to be just retro, it's omni causality. Everything is causing each other. We need to build a reality that's omni causal. And the only mechanism that could truly do that is one thing: knowing ahead, knowing around things, knowing beyond just the thing that we're looking at. And so we're clearly framing it to the scientific and spiritual world, that the body holds omni causal, trust based mechanisms that would heal the split that had happened through it's called the mind body problem. This is one of the biggest problems in philosophy. Is it something here, or is it something down there? We're realizing no, there's no separation. It's all embodying a universe, whether it's up there or down here. How do we construct from that? Okay, that's all I have to share. So yeah, you said you had.
Yeah, thank you. Wow. Well, regarding to what has been shared for few friends here, I have a question that, of course, nobody inside my previous experience nobody can be able to give me an idea or something that I don't need the answer. I don't need it. But now that the space has been here and some questions has been coming, I feel the opportunity to do it. So the question is, during the 2 years that I was under the energy, under the brown cap, I never was moving my body. To me, in the beginning, I feel strange, of course, because the pressure, the social and spiritual performance, and all this course from the Hinduism and all this Shaktipat colonization. But I had a deep sense that something so powerful was happening. And actually, I was having very deep experiences and realization, but I never was able to move. Of course, when some neurological and nervous system things happens and liberate things, of course, there's a spontaneous short movement, but just that, yes, something get connected. But I never experienced that. And now that this is coming, I question myself, okay, what is happening with the embodiment of how my body is knowing and understanding this? I don't know. I would like to maybe consider this for a question, and something can come to you. I will be happy listening something.
Let's have fun with this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so it's still causal, I think. Kundalini was up and coming as a term that would hold causality, just like God can act as a placeholder. I think Kundalini, especially as a goddess concept, was up and coming. It's easily usable because we haven't ontologized transformation from these sets of experiences that are to come, something about the body, something about energy moving. So a lot of what was happening prior to this, the usage of this term that would become really, really big, is in the spiritual community. There was a lot of talk about the ascension process. Because I do know the founder of the Kundalini activation process. I knew the notes that he was looking at. So a lot of people were going into breatharianism, raw food, very intense spiritual practice. They were interested in the rising of energy that would happen. So that is a paradigm, and for me, that paradigm is still reactive to past paradigms. When you look at the true nature of the energy systems, um, for there to be an ascension, there has to be an energy descent as well. So, Kundalini is holding a lot because of the need to ontologize like this concept people were holding, and because this concept is very much interested in the movement of the body as a manifestation of this, then it would easily be used to hold a cascade of many, many things that would like go together, like the power systems and so on and so forth. So every concept, anything that you hold is interconnected with all the other terms referenced with it. So Kundalini in traditional schools would be, let's say Shaktipat is a terminology that would arise with this term. And then with that, you cannot not have that if you don't have the guru disciple transference of energy. Um, so because inner dance was a free space that was given um, to many, like that which had spread then could easily be used by other very specific thought systems that are going to carry these and it wasn't just one person, it was like a lot of people were really, really interested in this, which for me is still quite an old story, that inner dance in fact is trying to shift. So I think the body movements are being used by a specific concept, and it 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 yeah, it's being used to promote something rather than just being a manifestation of something. It's becoming the the reason for a new causality, that if the body moves like this, which signifies the awakening of this, then this is happening, and then a transformation is going to work. So it's a whole cascade, like body movement, kundalini, ascension, transformation. There's some truth to it, but it's a half truth. It's very, very much just a part of like a much bigger picture. And we've talked about like w- that like on and on so many times. So my suggestion is every time you you have a concern, because there's like a power dynamic, there's hierarchical elements happening, it's to bring it into dialogue. Just talk about it. Like, do you have who has explanatory powers to reveal what does that actually really mean? Because the old version of structuralism, and that's the reason why structuralism didn't hold for long, is there's this relationality between signified, signifier, and saussure. So that what that means is, let's say you have this thing, and then you have the symbol that references. This looks like a symbol, but let's pretend that's a real tree. So this signifies this thing. Where we get stuck is when we look at this symbol and we replace the real substance, the real tree, with no, it's really this thing. That's what happens with some of these words sometimes as well. So that when you take this word and then you take what's actually, like, let's say this is energy, and you take that there, when you collapse it into a concept and it just becomes like a thought, it becomes like an abstract almost. There's something interesting in Kundalini at large, and I would honor the concept if it wasn't like the commercialized version that we're seeing now. Um, Going back into body, mind, let's say mind could still be closer to energy and vibratory states. So let's say there was an energy descent. So that, no, sorry, there was an energy ascent from the body, then we went into abstract thought. When we then need to return back to this, since mind is closer to energy, we now need to move into a body energy position, so that if this holds abstract reality, sorry if this is getting confusing, uh, body body experiences things in concrete ways through the senses, and then when we sense things through the senses in concrete experiences, we created thoughts around what was initially like very, very varied and intense and diverse. So abstract thoughts would simplify things. But then when abstract thoughts become condensed, maybe even dense in a way that a lot of our words are holding too much density, to bring that back into looseness, we actually, that's one of the reasons why we need to go back into the body. So what would happen is um, the body would become the new abstract. I'm gonna have a hard time explaining this, but the body becomes the placeholder for thought. So when you see the body moving like in certain ways, uh, I don't know. It's almost like this is the new alphabet. This is the new language. This is the new letter. These and that. So that we're learning to speak again, because there's a lot of erasing of the old and the past. This is why some of this is being pushed into the world somehow. But I think if that goes overboard and we just keep erasing and canceling things out, we won't arrive at a new science and a new rage of intelligence, because one of the products of the energy is the erasing of the mind. And if we simply use all of this to stop thinking, we will not be able to restart thinking very objectively and very effectively. We won't have um, notes. So a lot of what I shared to you, these are sounding really, really simple, but um, I've studied. When I experienced the energy, it was like, okay, this is all of it. So I had to look at what it meant from time and not just space. So I opened all of the books that seemed relatable to the nature of consciousness, and I perceived like a whole story being revealed through it that's that's in this energy somehow, so that intelligence and genius is still possible, rather than the opposite, which is to just erase thinking, to stop thinking altogether and just let the body do its thing. The mind still needs to activate somehow. So I'm not able to express it well, but the body becomes the new abstract, and the mind has become the new concrete. So dimensionally, there's something there. Kundalini kind of plays a part, but I think we need to redefine it. On my part, I simply am choosing to stop using the word because of the connotations it holds. It's an appropriation. I don't belong to that culture. A lot of people who are using it don't belong to that culture. It is true that we can take on the meaning of the word in a new way. That's a choice we have to make, but we have to be ready for the connotations that will bring. And if there's a lack of um, philosophizing, and when I say theory, I'm speaking more from the whole ancestry of critical theory, from the starting point of learning to ask certain questions. There's a whole train of awareness, so that what we're thinking is still part of that whole sequence. Now we're starting to see it from a non-sequential point of view, and we're seeing a lot more. So I do feel that many people need to catch up with um, what the world knows, that the mind within the spiritual experience may not have access to. So yeah, I'm failing because it's a hard question. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I would like to say that this part when you express that, okay, the body is the concrete, the mind is abstract, but in some moment of the journey, the mind, which is the mediator between the spirit and the body, become concrete as a holding the foundation of the spirit in the body. So the body
Exactly.
became maybe no abstract, maybe the body start to be everywhere. The body is not just here and now. It's everywhere and all the times. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're getting it in a way that I think I got it yesterday, but I'm grasping at it now. Okay, anyone else? I see two raised hands. Let's just keep going with this. Saula?
I wanted to share something in relation to many things that have been said today from the mind body language movement and how it knows, and I'm catching up later. From the summer, I remember just having these moments of migraine, like I would have a migraine on the left side of the head for a day or two, then after some weeks on the right side, then after some weeks like in the middle. And then when I would go in the process with the headache or like other way in my personal process, not a facilitated one, my body would be making like trying to bend back and making the bridge and then trying to connect my feet to my head. And while doing it, I understand it's like, oh my God, I'm doing Ouroboros, like the fish eating its own tail, fish, snake, well, fish, whatever, eating its own tail. And so I realized and then fast forward, the retrocausality comes in, and I start understanding that, well, as Cindy mentioned, the synchronization of the two sides of the brain. So the pain was kind of doing something like that. Then my body going into the loop. I was also looking at the loop in a way to break the loop, to connect the loop, to break the loop. The verticality was going into the loop in order for it not to be in like one direction. And then the retrocausality comes in, the multi-directionality. And fast forward some a week or two ago with Mick, we're looking at many concepts of like the retrocausality and the like how men are becoming women and women are becoming men, and like we're going in both directions and all of that. And I tell him the story how retrocausality came in Helsinki, how you mentioned it, and I said the sentence, it heated up my brain, like it has been heating up my brain since then. And I realized, oh my God, I had fever so many times since then. It's like during the process in Helsinki, I was having fever, and then COVID came. I had my first COVID right after, and like the whole fever thing, it's as if the computer was processing the information and just being heated up. And so connecting it like backwards, the two sides of the brain have to work in synchronicity in order to hold the multi-directionality, because it's impossible to hold it just with one side, because with one side it's going backwards, with the other it's going forward, but like to go back both ways at the same time. So, and then, well, we have a lot of like drawings with Mick from this whole thing of connecting the dots and remembering and responsibility that comes with this whole multi-directionality. Like there's no path to leave behind you, you know? So yeah, that's how my body was kind of telling me, and only later I kind of realized that the body was showing it all along since the beginning.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Symmetry is a good word. When I watch these videos, that's something I work with And I think symmetry usually comes after the opposite of symmetry. Um, there is asymmetry, which is not, it's not symmetrical. Like in language is not really symmetrical, but body mechanisms are not usually symmetrical. And this is what allows evolution and life itself, uh, allowing for diversity, allowing for change. But sometimes when we go into the opposite of symmetry, we find symmetry. So yeah, like I've seen you go into waves, different waves, and now it really does seem like something's coming together. Thank you. Gra, I think you raised your hand before Flor.
Hi, yes, I did. And I'm here trying to formulate this question. So the first kind of basic one that I would have, which is, I don't know if it's basic, or just to help my mind. When you were talking about retrocausality and how we are shifting our perception into that multidimensional space, would that be what characterizes inner dance or immerses inner dance within a post theory or framework of something? So yeah, would that be related to that? Because it wouldn't be anymore coming from a reactive state. It would be just coming from a space where everything is accepted. The second one, it's also maybe relating to that. If we do consider language as a sign or a symbol, an image that is somehow a way of translating what is beyond the line of space or consciousness. And we do know nowadays how language is filtered a lot by culture. So what I'm seeing is that there is like this mode of translating that comes like, it goes like, if we go with language, or in the case of the music, or when we use music in the playlist, if we go like from space or consciousness into the image, which would be language or the already composed music, like Adele or whatever, which is immersed or translated by this cultural filter that we have in the symbol, and then it arrives to us kind of filtered by culture. There would be a second way of translating this that would come from consciousness, and it would pass through sound, which sound as sound, not as music, which is not as filtered by culture as the sign or symbols or language is. And then it would come or arrive in the bodies, or I understand that it is a biological space, I understand that, but just to understand also how or why the shifts into music and sound and composing the playlist with different elements would somehow allow us to arrive at other dimensionalities or more expanded time perceptions. I guess this is it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, those are actually big, tough ones, but let's be brave. So, what Gra mentioned was post, and then there's post. So we need to define that for us to make this recognizable. So when you take something like modernism, when you then have postmodernism, postmodernism was like a critique or a skepticism of what this was holding. So there was some anger, a lot of emotions. So when you look at colonialism, post-colonialism was the same. That's when the colonized were like, hey, wait a minute, what did you guys do? So post is when we had gotten over the emotions, which are reactive tendencies. And I have always believed that inner dance is post. That okay, I love you. You colonized me. Okay, you industrialized me. You suck, but I understand you. And that's why I am an Oriental or Easterner that is able to handle Western perspectives. Because as a colonized person, I'm not gonna, like say, okay, after I went into this, then say, I want to see you eye to eye so that we can talk because I know you're not going to study my system, but I can study your system so we can at least arrive at a third system. A lot of people are studying my system and are still colonizing it. I'm not going to get angry over that because the very energy I hold is post. So change the spelling, put the C there. This is creative. We were excited here. Okay, let's industrialize, colonize the world. And then there's the reactive space. There's so many gifts that we can still get from here. Flora can probably draw a better gift. So we want to come back to creativity, but we don't want to lose the reactivity that also holds possible wisdom. So, what we need to learn is how is this constructed, and something that we're using is vibration and music. So, I'm not against Adele. I'm not so familiar with her, but she's very much that. When you look at mass music, things that would end up in common channels, like it's what holds a lot of space, and it's not usually the post space. So, um, postmodern music, interestingly, distorted the sound. It synthesized the sound. It put a lot of reactive elements that um, was appropriate to the moods and the emotions that were happening within post. But were we to move into this, I think we need to discover dimensionalities and expressions in music that's reactive. Reactive is truthful. If something comes up, put it out there, be honest, but at the same time, don't always hold this emotional charge, this reactivity that's actually a very old story, like you did it, I did it, you did it, an eye for an eye, which is where vengeance, revenge happens. If we were to find like a middle space, like a liminal space, a third space, which is something that comes out of post colonial theory. This is Homi Baba. Gra and I actually talked about that. Then I think a new music needs to come, and that would be, I don't know exactly how it would look like. Would it be planetary music? Would it be multidimensional music? We don't know because a lot of music has been controlled by industry. The very channels of music, the very technologies that hold music are very limited by what can earn more, what can, you know, and because music is really just another way of experiencing the brain, language, the mind, the body, consciousness, and culture. To rebuild everything from the ground up, everything needs to change. So I think you're on to something good, um, as a kind of spiritual theorist, Gra, who's gone through retrocausality in the ways that you have. So keep going. Okay. Floor.
Hi. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Good, good. Okay. It's more just simplifying, summarizing. I want to word what I'm simplifying in my head. I was so struck with the we are changing the eyes. And I actually was curious about the connection of journey and inner dance and the effects of the REM and blah, blah, blah. But I hope I can word this properly, but I'm just having this very simplified insight of inner dance space. We actually, through the experience or mimicking or reactivation or recreation of REM, we tend that tends to facilitate neural plasticity for people, assist the not only the physical energetic fast movement of the eyes, but also the not necessarily fast movement, but a new way of seeing things, even seeing emotions, seeing thoughts. And for some that don't necessarily experience REM in an inner dance space, that experience more bodily, somatic, strong movements, inner dance facilitates the new way of sensing things, of sensing emotions, even sensing thoughts. And so inner dance facilitate this new body mind experience and cognition, and or the body energy mind energy experience and cognition. I'm just verbalizing what I'm feeling.
Mm, thank you. Um, yeah, I think there's something to Gra's question that holds something deep. Retrocausality in terms of dimensionality. There was something in post-structuralist thinking that said something mysterious. It's like, okay, literacy is the age of the of writing or the book. Orality was spoken language. So in a way, Jack Derrida was
I
saying,
share the
"Oh,
screen.
sorry, wait, Zoom. Yeah, that's important. Okay. Normally, we think we went into spoken word before we learned to read and write. But Jack Derrida was saying something interesting. He's saying writing actually came before speech. Writing came before speech. I feel like I understand a little bit what he's saying. That dimensionally, before we constructed reality, there was the whole library of meaning already set up. So then, let's say the internet comes now to follow this thought. This actually came before this. So my feeling for a long time now is that inner dance is what comes after this. Like we can log on to this, you can go online, but what does it mean to log on to the inner net? You know? So in a way, in relation to what Oscar was saying, that we're going back to a primitivism, but at the same time we're accessing alien technology. This actually comes from here. So what does that look like from the point of view of the eye. Okay, so let's say this is the eye. So let's say you receive colors from outside, and then this is the pupils. Where you receive a lot of these rays is here. The retina, the retina is here, where you have these rods and cones, and then you interpret that, and then all of that gets sent to the hypothalamus into the visual cortex. And still in the interest in mapping what the colors mean, this is actually where you first interpret. So what the map looks like is it's called this retinotopic. So it's the same with the ear. Let's say this is the ear, and then it passes the cochlea, and so on and so forth. There's a kind of piano that's spread out near the cochlea, near the eardrum, and it's called the tonotopy. There's tonotopic maps inside the brain. So what I feel is happening is in the past we were seeing the 7 colors of the rainbow, and then when you place then the 12 around this, I don't know if that's 12. It's like 7 plus 12. What we're perceiving is now the outer layers, where before we were perceiving the inner layers. Were we to move from 3-dimensional space into 4-dimensional space, we would see then not the 12, but the 13. We would move from the 7 to the 13. 7 is like 6 plus 1, and then 12 plus 1. That's what this symbol means. So we need to attune the eyes and the ears, and that's why we are moving into the uh, tetrachromacy, which is that. That's what that means. Like women naturally have more color codes than men. They're more color sensitive, but even men are going to experience it. So the question is, what does it mean that we move into 4th-dimensional thought? So what I feel this means is the belief is that we're absorbing light from the outside, and but even science has been observing that it might actually be possible that we're generating light from inside. I forget the term. Instead of absorbing light from inside, when you so we keep looking at what the little prince said. It's only with your heart that one can see lightly. What is essential is invisible to the eyes. So when you do see what is invisible, that suddenly becomes visible through the heart. When you can see through the heart, I think there's a reversal happening. So instead of being a subject of the outer world, you become a generator of energy. You send out energy rather than receiving energy. And I think that's one of the ways we're changing the eyes. It's not so much like making judgments as to what you're seeing. And I think that's what it means when Floor mentions that sound is becoming light. When you send out your vibrations, you can send out your perceptions, and instead of judgment, you can actually create reality. But I think that can only happen by truly absorbing the outside. Can you truly send out to the outside? What you give to the other is what you give to the self. That there are these conditions when you're truly listening, then you're truly speaking. When you're truly receiving, then only then can you truly give. So yeah, I think we're using our eyes too much in terms of judgment and image narcissism and um, making objects what was vibration. That's what the image does. To make it move into another dimensionality, we need to radically vibrate more. And the work that we're doing is that. I think retrocausality becomes more clear when we understand how the heart and the ear works together with the eye and the brain. And then when you balance that, when you create symmetry between those, a lot of the work that we're doing is designed to help to create a bridge between these two that has been separate, that need to come back into unity. Thank you. Okay, so 3.5 hours is, quite long. Thank you for staying, for those who came. I know there's World Cup stuff happening out there and holidays. Really honored that you could, keep in touch and maintain your curiosity in your study process. So if you could unmute and help me to just close this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Mm.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Amazing,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Mm.
Bye.
Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.